What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors sits down with a host who refuses to listen? In just 39 seconds of pure tension, a legendary interview would explode into chaos, ending with a walkout that nobody saw coming. Samuel L. Jackson walked onto the set that day expecting a normal interview. He had done thousands of them before. Talk about movies, share some stories, maybe crack a few jokes. Simple. But from the moment he sat down in that chair across from Piers Morgan, something felt different. The air was thick, the energy was off, and within minutes, everything would spiral completely out of control. Piers Morgan leaned back in his chair with that signature smirk on his face, the kind of look that says he already knows everything and you're just there to confirm it. Samuel settled into his seat, relaxed but focused. He had no idea what was about to unfold. "So Samuel," Piers began, his voice dripping with false politeness, "let's talk about your career. You've played a lot of, how should I put this, aggressive characters, angry men, violent types. Do you ever worry that you're reinforcing negative stereotypes?" The question hung in the air like a grenade, with the pin pulled out. Samuel's expression barely changed, but if you look closely, you could see his jaw tighten just slightly. He took a breath. "Well, Piers, I think you're looking at it the wrong way. I play complex human beings, characters with depth, with pain, with purpose. Reducing them to just angry or violent, that's your interpretation, not mine." Piers waved his hand dismissively, like he was swatting away a fly. Yes, but come on, let's be honest here. You're known for shouting, for being intense, for playing these thugs, in many cases. Surely you see what I'm getting at? Samuel leaned forward now. His voice stayed calm, but there was steel underneath it. Thugs? That's the word you're going with? See, that's interesting. Because I've played doctors, I've played heroes, I've played teachers, I've played complex fathers and leaders, but you just called them thugs. "I didn't mean it like that," Piers said, but his tone suggested he absolutely meant it exactly like that. "I'm simply saying that Hollywood has a tendency to cast you in a certain type of role, and I'm wondering if you're comfortable with that." "What I'm not comfortable with," Samuel replied, his patience visibly thinning, "is sitting here while you try to box me into some narrow category that exists only in your head. You invited me here to talk about my new film, but instead you're trying to make some point about stereotypes while actively stereotyping me." Piers laughed, actually laughed. A condescending chuckle that made it clear he thought Samuel was being too sensitive. "Oh, come now, don't be so defensive. I'm just asking questions. That's what I do. If you can't handle a bit of tough questioning, maybe you're in the wrong business." "I can handle tough questions just fine," Samuel shot back. "What I can't handle is disrespect dressed up as journalism. There's a difference between asking tough questions and being deliberately provocative for ratings." The tension in the studio was electric now. Crew members glanced at each other nervously. This was not going according to anyone's plan. Piers, however, seemed to be enjoying himself. He thrived on conflict, on making his guests uncomfortable, on creating these moments of television drama. But he had severely underestimated who he was dealing with. "Provocative?" Piers scoffed. "I think you're being a bit dramatic, Samuel, which I suppose makes sense given your profession. Tell me, do you ever just have a normal conversation, or is everything a performance with you?" That was the line. That was the moment where something shifted in Samuel's eyes. He sat perfectly still, looking at Piers with an intensity that could melt steel. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute conviction. "You know what your problem is, Piers? You think being rude is the same thing as being smart. You think insulting people is the same thing as asking hard questions. And you think that because you have a camera pointed at you, you can say whatever you want without consequences. I have every right to ask my guests whatever I choose," Piers retorted, his face flushing slightly. "This is my show, my studio, my rules. If you don't like it, you're welcome to leave." "Is that what you want?" Samuel asked. "You want me to leave? Because it seems like you've been trying to push me out that door since I sat down. What's the matter, Piers? You scared of having a real conversation, one where you actually listen instead of just waiting for your turn to talk?" Piers' fake smile was gone now. He was irritated, his composure cracking. "I'm not scared of anything, certainly not of some actor who can't take a little criticism. You people in Hollywood are all the same. You live in your bubble, you get praised constantly, and the moment someone challenges you, you fall apart." "You people," Samuel repeated slowly. Interesting choice of words. You want to clarify what you mean by you people, Piers? Actors, Piers said quickly, but the damage was done. The implication hung in the air, and everyone in that studio knew exactly what it sounded like. I meant actors. Don't try to twist my words. I don't need to twist anything, Samuel said. You're doing all the work yourself. Here's what I think is really happening. I think you brought me on this show expecting me to play a part. The angry guy, the loud guy, the guy you could poke and prod until I gave you your viral moment. But I'm not playing that game. I'm sitting here, speaking calmly, answering your questions, and that's making you frustrated because it's not the show you wanted to produce. Piers was fully rattled now. His carefully constructed persona of the unflappable host was crumbling in real time. That's complete nonsense. I treat all my guests with respect. Respect? Samuel's eyebrows shot up. You've called my life's work stereotypical. You've called my characters thugs. You've questioned my intelligence. And you've been condescending from the moment I sat down. If this is your version of respect, I'd hate to see how you treat people you actually dislike. I think you're being far too sensitive, Piers insisted, but his voice had lost its confidence. Perhaps you're not used to being in situations where someone doesn't just agree with everything you say. And perhaps you're not used to being in situations where someone calls you out on your nonsense, Samuel countered. Let me break this down for you in simple terms, Piers. You invited me here under false pretenses. You said we'd discuss my work, my craft, my upcoming projects. Instead, you've spent this entire time trying to belittle me, trying to get under my skin, trying to create a moment. Well, congratulations. You got your moment. Just not the one you wanted. The studio was dead silent, except for the hum of cameras and lights. Producers in the control room were frozen, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let this train wreck continue. Piers opened his mouth to respond, but Samuel wasn't finished. Here's what really bothers you, Piers. I came in here with respect. I sat down ready to have a conversation, and you couldn't handle that. You needed to be the big man, the tough interviewer, the guy who breaks people down. But you're not tough. You're just mean, and there's a massive difference. How dare you, Piers sputtered, his face now completely red. You come onto my show and insult me? After I gave you this platform? Platform? Samuel let out a short laugh. Man, I don't need your platform. You called me because having me on your show gets you viewers. Don't act like you did me some favor. And as for insulting you, I'm just holding up a mirror. If you don't like what you see, that's not my problem. Piers stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I don't have to sit here and take this. This is my show. Then act like a professional, Samuel said, still seated, still calm. Sit down and have an actual conversation instead of whatever this performance is. I'm the one performing. Piers' voice was getting louder now, more shrill. You're the actor. You're the one who makes a living pretending to be other people. And now you're sitting here pretending to be offended by simple questions. Samuel stood up now too, slowly, deliberately. He wasn't rushed. He wasn't frantic. He moved with purpose. There's nothing simple about what you've been doing, and we both know it. You came into this wanting a fight. You wanted the angry black man stereotype you kept bringing up. You wanted me to yell, to storm off, to give you exactly what you expected, and I'm not going to do it. Then what are you doing? Piers demanded. Because it certainly looks like you're throwing a tantrum to me. I'm leaving, Samuel said simply. I'm walking out of here with my dignity intact, something you clearly know nothing about. Piers' face twisted into something ugly. All pretense of civility was gone. Fine, leave, run away. That's what people like you do when you can't handle the truth. Samuel paused, turned back, looked Piers directly in the eyes. People like me, there it is again. You really can't help yourself, can you? I didn't mean anything by it, Piers said, but his voice was weak now. You meant everything by it, Samuel said. That's the sad part. You think you're clever, but you're transparent. Every little dig, every loaded question, every dismissive comment, it all adds up. And now you're standing there, on your own show, looking like exactly what you are. A small man trying desperately to feel big by making others feel small. Get out, Piers said, his voice shaking with rage. Get out of my studio. I'm already gone, Samuel replied. He turned to the crew. Y'all have a good day. Sorry you had to witness this. Then he looked back at Piers one final time. Good luck with your show, man. You're gonna need it. He walked off the set with his head high, his steps measured and confident. Behind him, Piers stood there, face flushed, chest heaving, looking around at his crew like he expected them to back him up. But nobody said anything. They just stared, some in shock, some in quiet admiration for what they'd just witnessed. Piers turned to his producer, trying to regain control. Well, that was certainly dramatic. I suppose some people just can't handle honest discourse. But his voice lacked conviction. He knew. Everyone knew. He had pushed too far, revealed too much of his own character, and lost control of his own show. The carefully crafted image of the sharp interviewer who could handle anyone had been shattered by someone who simply refused to play along with the game. Samuel didn't storm out in anger. He didn't yell or throw things. He didn't give Piers the satisfaction of losing control. Instead, he walked away with grace, with dignity, and with the moral high ground firmly in his grasp. That was what made it so powerful. That was what made it sting so much for Piers. In the dressing room, Samuel took off his microphone, handed it to a crew member with a polite thank you, and gathered his things. A few staff members approached him, apologizing quietly for what had happened. He smiled at them, shook their hands, told them it wasn't their fault. He held no ill will toward them. They were just doing their jobs. Back on set, Piers was scrambling. He called for a break, demanded they not air what just happened, tried to spin the narrative in his favor. But it was too late. The damage was done. Not to Samuel, who would walk out of that building with his reputation intact. The damage was to Piers himself, to his credibility, to his image as a fair interviewer. The interview had started with Piers in complete control, smug and confident. It ended with him looking desperate and small, grasping at straws while his guest walked away victorious, without ever raising his voice or losing his cool. That was the real story. Not a shouting match or a dramatic explosion, but a masterclass in maintaining dignity in the face of disrespect. Samuel got into his car, his driver asking if everything was okay. "Yeah," he said, looking out the window. "Everything's fine. Just another day dealing with people who mistake rudeness for courage." The driver nodded, started the engine, and pulled away from the studio. Behind them, inside that building, chaos was unfolding. Producers were arguing about what to do. Piers was ranting about being disrespected on his own show, but none of it mattered to Samuel. He had done what he came to do. He had stood up for himself without compromising who he was. The interview would become legendary, but not for the reasons Piers had hoped. It became a case study in how not to conduct an interview, how not to treat a guest, and how quickly things can fall apart when ego overrides professionalism. Piers had tried to make Samuel look bad and ended up exposing his own character flaws instead. What made it even more remarkable was how Samuel had handled it. He could have matched Piers' energy. He could have yelled back, insulted him, made a scene, but he didn't. He stayed calm, spoke clearly, made his points with precision, and left when it became clear that no productive conversation was possible. That took more strength than any angry outburst ever could. In the world of talk shows and interviews, there's an unspoken agreement. The host provides a platform, the guest provides content, and both parties treat each other with basic respect. Piers had violated that agreement from the start. He came in with an agenda, with loaded questions designed to provoke rather than illuminate. And when Samuel didn't take the bait, when he responded with intelligence and composure, Piers only got more aggressive. The really telling moment was when Piers kept using those phrases. "You people, people like you." Even when he tried to clarify, everyone knew what he meant. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't clever. It was just revealing. And Samuel called it out every single time, calmly and clearly, not letting anything slide. That's what made Piers so uncomfortable. He was used to guests who either fought back emotionally or backed down completely. Samuel did neither. He held his ground without losing his temper. He challenged every assumption without raising his voice. He made Piers look foolish simply by remaining reasonable. The moment when Piers stood up, thinking that would intimidate Samuel, only to have Samuel stand up calmly and announce he was leaving, that was when Piers lost completely. He had no move left. He couldn't kick Samuel out because Samuel was already leaving. He couldn't claim moral superiority because everyone could see who had behaved badly. He couldn't even salvage the interview because there was nothing left to salvage. And then Samuel's final words to the crew, thanking them and apologizing that they had to witness it, that was the nail in the coffin. It showed he understood. They were just doing their jobs. It showed he had empathy for their position. It made him look even better and made Piers look even worse by comparison. For Piers, the whole thing was a disaster. He had brought on a major star, someone who could bring attention to his show, and he had completely blown it. Not because Samuel was difficult or unprofessional, but because Piers couldn't get out of his own way. He let his ego drive the conversation straight into a wall. The interview exposed something fundamental about both men. Samuel walked in as a respected actor and left with his reputation enhanced. He had shown grace under pressure, intelligence in the face of provocation, and dignity when confronted with disrespect. Piers, on the other hand, had shown himself to be petty, provocative for the sake of it, and unable to handle a guest who refused to be diminished. What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? Usually, one of them breaks. In this case, Piers broke. His carefully constructed persona shattered against Samuel's quiet strength. All his tricks, all his tactics, all his attempts to control the narrative fell flat because Samuel simply wouldn't play along. The beauty of it was in the simplicity. Samuel didn't need to do anything dramatic. He just needed to be himself, stand up for himself, and refuse to accept being treated poorly. That was enough. That was more than enough. It was everything. In 39 seconds of pure, unfiltered tension, after question, after insulting question, after provocation, Samuel had made his decision. Not in anger, not in haste, but with clear purpose. He was done. And when Samuel L. Jackson decides he's done, there's no arguing, no negotiating, no second chances. There's only the walk to the door and the sound of everything Piers had tried to build crashing down behind him. The interview nobody expected to end that way became the interview everyone remembered. Not as a shouting match or a dramatic blow-up, but as a quiet demonstration of strength, dignity, and self-respect. Samuel didn't need to fight dirty because he knew who he was. And that confidence, that unshakable sense of self, was something Piers could never touch, no matter how hard he tried.